Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Ghosts and Spirits video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's wrap things up for this series here with this particular video. This is actually not a suggestion either from now or in the past, but actually it's from an anniversary of sorts, a very tragic one though, and it has to do with a 40th anniversary of the MGM Grand Fire. That's right, back on November 21st, 1980, so just a couple of days back at least from our present year, that's when this incident occurred. And the reason why I'm including it here in the Ghosts and Spirits playlist is because to this very day there's still a very strong set of hauntings that occur at that hotel, especially if you go to certain floors. More on that here in a minute. Then that's when you'll have a strong chance of encountering some very ghostly apparitions. Very, very tragic circumstance. I felt that first, at least for this Ghosts and Spirits video, I'm going to talk about that tragic circumstance and then I'll share the hauntings afterward. But it has to do with this. It is basically known as the MGM Grand Fire and all the ghostly hauntings associated with it. So let's go ahead and let's talk about all that tragic information here. And then later on, I would love to hear if anyone has stayed in that hotel. Let me know what your own personal experiences are. So essentially, here's what happened. Again, back on November 21st, 1980, back then there was a hotel called the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino. Today, it's actually known as Bally's. That's just the way Las Vegas casinos work. Give it 5 years and you'll have changes all around when it comes to certain casinos/hotels. But back then, the Bally's was known as the MGM Grand, and it was considered one of the premier locations there in Las Vegas. In fact, it was a 26-story tall hotel. It had more than 2,000 hotel rooms. Originally opened in 1973, that would have made it still somewhat new back in 1980, just around 7 years old. And so no doubt that there was still a lot of people that were there. In fact, 5,000 people were in and around that hotel at the very time that this incident occurred, that this tragic fire occurred. And it's amazing to read this information because you realize just how tiny, the tiniest little thing can cause so much calamity afterward. In fact, it gets very, very technical, but to sum it up here, essentially there was a restaurant that was there at the time known as the Deli, and this location had some piece of equipment there that was, I guess, installed, but it wasn't transferred or placed in a correct manner. And the way it was apparently set up, this receptacle was not grounded correctly, and then there was a lot of movement associated with whatever that was. I think it was actually a pastry display, if I read the information correctly. And so over time, the way it was moving, it was just undulating in a completely rhythmic manner. It would cause things to disappear. Like, in other words, there was this plastic surrounding one of the lines, and then it led to the copper being exposed, and then the copper in turn touched some other type of electric conduit. You can see how there are things in motion that caused this fire to occur. But either way, though, all these things happened almost like a miracle, if you could call it that. A very tragic one, though, where this corrosion just led to the contact, which led to electrical conduit and so on. And then that's when, boom, there was this spark that occurred. And then this spark actually went up with some of the other insulation, with other things surrounding it. And then all of a sudden, that was it. That's when the fire started. In fact, reading the information, it was around 7:07 a.m. that it was first discovered by one of the employees there. Either someone that was there doing an inspection, or there was someone else that was there as part of the restaurant by the towel crew. Either way, though, they saw, interestingly enough, a flickering light. Like it was something that was within one of the walls, not realizing that all of a sudden that was actually being caused by a whole set of flames behind it, almost like a wall of flames that was occurring. It's just that the wall was covering many, many things. And so that's how the fire expanded. And in fact, it got even worse. Like this, reading this information, you can see that there was so many bad circumstances that occurred one after the other. In fact, turning on, it looks like certain areas, like trying to make sure that there was more like, because the smoke was building and they wanted to make sure that the smoke would not stay in one place and that it would help spread, like in other words, to help clear the smoke. That actually caused more oxygen to come in And then that's when the fire spread even rapidly. And then reading some of the other information, wallpaper, PVC piping, glue, a bunch of plastic mirrors, all that stuff that was surrounding the actual lobby near the deli itself, that in turn was highly flammable, and it caused a huge, massive fireball to actually speed through the entire casino floor. In fact, get this, reading the information, it spread at 10 to 13 miles per hour, almost 20 foot a second. Can you believe that? An actual fire racing 20 foot a second. Those people would not have had a chance. Remember, there were about 5,000 people in the MGM Grand at this time. In fact, it only took about 6 minutes for the entire casino floor, everything from the very start, from that tiny flickering that associate saw behind one of the walls, to the entire casino floor to be fully engulfed. It only took about 6 minutes to do so. And then, of course, it started spreading even further upstairs. And then another tragedy, a calamity of tragedy, was this. Fire sprinklers were installed, but only in certain areas. In fact, they were not there by the restaurant, and I don't think they were actually there by the lobby. Interestingly enough, they were pretty much centered around the areas associated with the gaming, and then also with the quote-unquote bank, like in other words, where all the money was being kept. That's where most of the sprinklers were, and none of them essentially in the other locations. Also, a lot of the other floors, the hotel floors, that went up where people were staying and actually sleeping, because remember, this was around 7 in the morning when this occurred. Many of them didn't have fire sprinklers in their rooms and in certain bottlenecked areas either, because the hotel was built at a time when it wasn't required. Reading some of the more detailed information on this too, it turns out it's like a unique glitch, if you could call it that. If the hotel wasn't built at a time that a policy was later installed afterward requiring sprinklers, then interestingly enough, the hotel was not required to update itself to that new policy. Obviously, that led to some very, very bad things. And then reading the information even further about the fire, it turns out that most people killed in the actual fire itself, because there were a total of 85 people, 85 lost souls that ended up being killed. That included actually 7 employees. Most of them actually ended up dying from the smoke concentration. This fire was ruthless. It was absolutely brutal. I mean, you're looking at some of the pictures of it here. You can see how this fire just looked just completely black. It was absolute smoke inhalation and carbon monoxide poisoning that caused these deaths. And the way it happened was this smoke had to go one way, and because most casino doors are closed, let's say going into the lobby, into the first floor, then it was pretty much just going upwards. There it was, the smoke going from one floor to another, and like anything else involving water, finding the easiest avenue to get to, that's what this smoke was doing. It was going in between the walls, it was going in between vents, it was going actually in between the very same staircases that people tried to escape through, and then it was going into the rooms themselves. All of this was causing the smoke to just congest almost every single part of the hotel, the casino hotel itself. It was very, very tragic. Reading the information too, as far as the firefighters and the way they came into this situation, because obviously they were called within moments and there was a huge assortment of them all around. They stated that when they went into it, they found a large amount of objects on the floor. Like they didn't know what that was. The lights were off because the electricity was off, and then the smoke, the deep black darkness of the smoke was making things even worse to see. They didn't realize that so many of these mounds that they were looking at were actually bodies. There they were, just dead as is, because they were almost instantly killed because of the instant smoke and the carbon monoxide poisoning. Just very, very tragic again all around because of so many bad, horrid circumstances. So there you had the sprinklers not being within certain areas. There you had all the material that was easily flammable. There you had no way for the smoke and the fire to really go out from the first floor. So it ascended upwards, especially the smoke. And then you had all those trapped guests there just sleeping, having no idea that this would happen. By the way, there were no alarms there too. Like, in other words, alarm in every single room to alert everyone about what occurred. And so many of them just ended up dying pretty much right there. because of it. And so much bad things, so many bad circumstances that occurred from this. Luckily though, if there's any good news, if you could even call it that, from all this, is the fact that even now so many new laws, regulations, requirements, everything you have now in Las Vegas and in turn in other hotels throughout the country and the world were adapted from this tragic circumstance. So now, in other words, you have to have sprinklers in every single room, obviously in certain areas on every floor, and not just like let's say in the casino lobby area, but no, in everywhere, like restaurants and anything else involving stores, must have them there. There's all sets of alarms now installed to make sure that there's much quicker detection, like if there's equipment that's causing potential fires in the future. And then also those alarms I was mentioning earlier, they're now installed in every single room. I've actually been in a circumstance where I was staying in one of the Las Vegas casino hotels and the alarm turned on and you could hear it within every single room. Like there was a speaker in every room advising about what was going on, what the situation was. So again, all of that comes from this very tragic circumstance. So 85 people ultimately were killed, over 650 injured because of the fire itself. And the way people stated, the firefighters and others, when they came across that location, some of them were again killed right on the spot. You could see them right there surrounding the slot machines, right there surrounding the rooms, the hallways, the trapped areas involving the aforementioned stairwells and so on. Very horrible. I won't even go into other details, though. It's just very horrible to read. So I'm going to at least for the sake of the privacy of some of those poor guests, I'm going to save those. But yeah, all around, just really, really bad stuff. So, mentioning all of that, the reason why, again, I included it here in the ghost and spirit side is because of this. There's been a lot of hauntings that have occurred ever since then at that hotel. It definitely has changed names. Again, it's known as the Bally's Hotel, but the way people state is if you go and you stay at the hotel, you will encounter a set amount of hauntings, and especially if you go to certain areas of the hotel. In fact, I think it's starting on level 14, if I'm not mistaken. I was trying to find again that information as far as what's associated with the haunting, like what specific floor range, but I believe it's floors 14 through 19, if I'm not mistaken. And that way, if you go there, this is what'll happen. People were here weeping within the hallways themselves, obviously weeping from the very people, the souls, in other words, that were lost in the fire, maybe still trying to find a way out. People will actually hear coughing as well, almost like mimicking the tragic circumstance involving the deep, deep, dark black smoke causing so much asphyxiation and so much carbon monoxide poisoning, and this coughing from the poor souls themselves, just trying to get away from it. That's what people have seen, and people have been hearing that as well from the guests themselves. Then the people will also see ghostly apparitions, both in the hallways associated with the hotel, the very same hallways that ended up passing away. And I don't think you can really go to the stairwell, but that's where they'll also see some of the apparitions there, almost reliving their past, their very few last moments, trying to make sure that they could, I don't know, find another way, almost like in a perpetual loop, trying to see if they could finally find a way to end it and then get out of the calamity that they had. Obviously, it won't work. They'll just continue to have that same thing happen over and over because of certain situations involving ghosts. And then if you go in the actual casino hotel, the lobby area itself, that's where people see apparitions too. In fact, people have stated that they see these apparitions still playing the actual slot machines themselves, because remember, this fire was traveling at almost 20 feet per second. I don't know about you, but that's almost like the length of a bus itself. Like it went from one spot to another almost instantly. And then when that happened, people were there holding on to their slot machines, just playing as is, and then that's when it engulfed them. So people still state that they see this stuff happening, like they see the actual patrons there playing their machines almost as if it never really happened, because they had no idea how instantly their deaths were. And then of course there's the usual cold spots that people have mentioned, stating that yes, there should be something like almost paranormal that just suddenly passed them. And then I imagine that there's also warm spots too, pertaining to the fire itself. And if you stay in one of the hotel rooms too, who knows, you may have a chance to actually see see one of those apparitions. I didn't read much information though involving like shadow people or other type of full-blown apparitions, but if you definitely stay within one of those floors again, I think it's still the floor number 14 to 19, then that's when you'll have a chance to experience at least orally, like through your ears. Through your hearing at least, you'll have something involving some kind of noise that you might hear associated with those hauntings. Tragic stuff. My closest inspection that I've ever done is this. I visited the hotel about maybe 2 or 3 years ago, just doing my usual ghostly investigations. And as I did so, I went to the outside first. As you can see here, I took a picture from there, and I believe that was the exact area where the actual fire occurred. And so visualize that 40 years ago, that area would have been engulfed in flames. You would have seen flames coming out of everywhere, including the smashed up windows that people were trying to do. Like they were on the top floors, they were smashing the windows trying to get out almost hopelessly, like there was no chance for them. And so you would have seen smoke coming out from many of those windows. And then after that was done, I went to visit the lobby area, as you can see in this picture here. I didn't really get a chance to do much, only because I was going to go see another show very soon. And fortunately, I timed it wrong. I didn't realize, again, how far away buildings are away from each other there in Las Vegas. They look close by, but they're not really. So I was kind of like pressed up against time. So I was only able to take this picture here. But again, this is the actual lobby area where so much of these hauntings have occurred to this very day, the ones I was mentioning earlier. So if you go there to the Bally's Casino/Hotel today, who knows, you may have a chance as far as running into these particular apparitions, and then if so, then you'll be able to at least experience what many others have as well. That brings up the next point too. Anyone there that has been there, stayed there, maybe even more specifically, please post your experiences, post your comments below. I'd love to hear if you had any type of paranormal experience at all. Something else, the weeping, the coughing, maybe noise, shuffling, people running down the hall when they shouldn't be there, stuff like that. If anybody can add more experience on that, that'd be really great to hear. Plus, I'm going to do this too. I'm going to include the links below for 2 of my other popular videos, both of them having to do with the Luxor. One of them, I was talking about the hauntings associated with the suicides, the poor woman, the one that jumped from one of the top floors there of the atrium, and then also another one where I did a live tour of the actual Luxor itself. They've gotten a good amount of views, and so it shows that people are still interested in this stuff. So I'm going to include the link for those below as well, in case you wanted to get a chance to do so. Who knows, in the future, I might actually do a full-blown investigation there at Bally's, as it's known now, and then try to see if I could explore some of those hallways themselves, some of those rooms, and so on from the 14th, 19th floor. I just haven't had any invitation to stay at Bally's yet, for free at least, and so that's why it's been kind of a hesitant on my end. But if I ever do get an opportunity, then yes, I will do so, and I'll try to specifically request one of those floors and then see what kind of investigation can be done. So, all right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.